Ciao, hi, hey guys, I'm just going to check I'm live on Facebook as well. Yes, Facebook was quick this time, unlike in part one, and as it sometimes is, so credit to Facebook this time, kudos to them for this one. Not going to give a huge amount of credit for part one because it took ages to upload, but I'm thankful for the opportunity. But anyway, you might be able to notice I've got my new glasses. Well, I had glasses before, but I lost them, so I had to wait to get new ones. Anywho, welcome to part two. I know I probably didn't do my usual intro. Hi. Ciao, hi, hey, hola, it's your boy, M.K.S, amigos, and all that kind of thing, or whatever. Don't go on my keyboard, so my little cat is trying to get some fuss for once, but it's normally when I at least want him to have something, but he's been out in the rain for some reason. He likes to go out in the rain. But anyway, welcome to part two, anyway. I'll try not to waffle too much. And these are pointers number 11 to 20. I talked about like how I like to think of a certain theme. I know I've talked about it in the past. I was going to say, I don't know if I asked, do these glasses make me look? Do these glasses have the illusion? You just keep watering me. These glasses have the illusion of making me look more intelligent. I love to create an illusion, but of being intelligent. But then again, I don't want people to expect me to actually be intelligent, asking me complex questions or whatever. But anyway, these are pointers number 11 to 20. I'm not very intelligent, but I do have a lot of ideas in that silly head of mine. It's really wet. Anyway, I'm flicking water at me. But, anyway, sorry. So yeah, these are pointers number 11 to 20. So here goes. So number 11, I was thinking about. I was struggling to think of ideas for this, and then suddenly a brainwave hit me. Normally, for number 11, I like to think of like a changing number. For the number 11 reminds me of like, so when I think of lists or whatever, I think of change in number 11. So I was thinking, how can we get more black people, especially in America, into politics and tech, maybe from a young age as well, learning about politics and tech, maybe starting from a young age to learn about things like that, lobbying together and that kind of thing. So how can politicians, potential mentors for technology, just like in business, in this case in politics, and people in tech, help to train up and gainfully employ more African Americans and black people around the world, but especially in America, I'm thinking of for February, as I said in part one and in previous videos. So yeah, I'm going to move on to point number 12, which is, I think if there was a global network for black people in politics and tech and areas like that, which I talked about, they could teach each other what they know about politics and about tech and about lobbying and things like that. Maybe even combine different areas like that and work together in those areas. And also, I'd love to know how can we support more black content creators on YouTube and TikTok and things like that. Again, as I said before, like for some reason I think of YouTube and TikTok on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So yeah, how can we help more people get into those areas? Number 13, as I said in part one, in point number one, thinking about myself a little bit, talking about my own goals. By the end of today, I was thinking I probably should just write this in my journal or whatever, but I wasn't sure whether to mention this. But I will say, like, by the end of today, I hope to cut my finger and toenails, strip and remake my bed. Remember things I need to do. I went to get my glasses, which is one chore I wanted to do. And that's a very simple one. I don't mind walking, so as lazy as I am. Which makes me think a lot of people are very lazy, because I'm quite lazy. But when it comes to walking, I think it becomes a habit. Like people say, "Oh, this person will do it, or that person can do it. My kids can do it. My niece can do it. My nephew can do it, or whatever." And I think that makes people very lazy when it comes to walking. But yeah, I think I probably should write this in my journal. But yeah, I'm just trying to think of any other chores I want to do. And I went to get my hypertension medicine for tonight. I have to have that before I go to sleep for my hypertension. But also, thinking about number 13, I know I mentioned about my selfish dreams. I normally say selfish stuff about Italian soccer. And also going back to the black community. Again, I'd love to, as I talked about in part one, in points number 1 and 6, about how I hope that working with African Americans will benefit Italian soccer. And maybe they can show there's a advantage in terms of working with black people around the world and tackling racism and that kind of thing. and more African Americans could then go and play for, be part of academies and sports clubs for Italian soccer teams, and invest into and sponsor Italian soccer teams. So support both as fans and as financial supporters, backers, and whatever. So investors, sponsors, and that kind of thing. So hopefully it'll be a mutual benefit though as well. Italian soccer could benefit them by investing in them. But normally for number 13, I think of a selfish sort of thing. So hence I'm talking about my own goals and things I have to do, knowing that things I have to do in life that have to be done, like changing my bed and freshening up and all that kind of thing. Normally I like to do that for a new month, but I just haven't had the energy, memory, or motivation, or whatever stopped me. I haven't had that to do it. But also, sorry, going back to African Americans, thinking about what issues African Americans, what troubles they face in 2026, or whatever, what current troubles they face, and talking about history as well, Black History, like it's Black History Month, of course, as I say, talking about the history they've had, the trouble they've had historically, and also the trouble that they might face today. Thinking of whether it's T, problems, issues, troubles, or whatever. Obviously, trouble because it's a T. Number 14, on the subject of trouble, Black people being troubleshooters, as in, if I've used the term right, problem solvers and that kind of thing. So I think like shooting down trouble. So I'm not sure if I'm using that term correctly. I think it's a term in industry, but yeah, getting more Black troubleshooters, Black people solving problems together and that kind of thing, taking on trouble, and maybe once they acknowledge the trouble they face, the other areas, solving that issue as much as possible. I think that'd be pretty cool. Number 15, I mentioned in part 1, in point number 5, about goal setting, and how I like to think of goal setting on Tuesdays. So working on their goals and aims and ambitions and that kind of thing. Number 16, how can people work together and be more empowered and things like that. Number 17, be cool if they told their own tales and like urban legends, creepypastas and things. I know I'm mainly trying to think of things beginning with T, but I guess urban legends, creepypastas and things like their own tales. How could they make their own? And horror, I think, well, tales which could be made into horror movies, thrillers, that's what begins with T, of course, books and things like that. I probably should break free from this use of alliterations I often use, probably a bit too much. So I should mix up a bit, perhaps. But moving on, number 18, what are some positive things the Black community can market? Like how can, again, uniting together, learning from each other, working together with other POC, and challenging some of the stereotypes, perhaps some of the negative stereotypes, like people saying that people are criminal, violent, or whatever. Maybe they get financially empowered and show what they can achieve, they can prove those stereotypes wrong and say, actually, it's the white countries, if you like, or whatever you would call them, to use a political sort of way of saying it, that go to war. I suppose it's all political kind of, but that go to war and all that kind of thing. If they boycott the military, which I talked about before, they could say, actually, we're not the ones who are taking over places like Iraq or Iran or whatever other places. We are neutral. Yes, which I think they should be, as an advisor. As with all these videos and my ideas and tips and whatever, they are just that, like tips and whatever. So whether they choose to take them or not is up to them. Like, maybe people could tip like people more as well to empower them, or maybe not. That's their choice. Of course, number 19, as I say, technology and things like working together in tech. Black people working together in tech. I'd love to see more Black people being represented in tech, from Australasia and Africa to Europe and even Asia, and of course the Americas. And number 20, also supporting people from all different age groups. Young and old people can learn from each other, so they could have networks. I talked about like with Black Wall Street, and I think of that on like Wednesdays, Wall Street Wednesdays, but they could host events which help people to network and things like that, including in business, but also including in tech and other areas, including politics. They could lobby together and that kind of thing. And I just remembered something I was going to say in point 3, but I completely forgot, which is they could lobby for having lower taxes or being tax exempt. I worked out roughly it would be, they could make probably more than this. I actually think I underestimated or conservatized it on purpose, but they could make they could save up to about 60 billion, I think, roughly. If those figures are quite accurate, because I was working out like about if 10%, I think it's actually more than 10%. Again, I know I mentioned this recently, but if roughly about 10% of the population are African American, and um, that's about 30 million, and then they earn on average about 40k. I think it's a bit more than that, but say 40k, and they pay about 20% tax. My figure came to about $60 billion, I think. I suppose that's probably annually as well. So that could go into an account. If they could double their money, they would get about $120 billion. And I suppose that would be, I think I worked out it would be roughly about 20, maybe even 30k a year for possibly for pretty much every African American. Now they could choose to give that to whatever the figure that could be. They could work it out. I might have got my figures wrong, to be honest. I'm not very good at maths, but they could have, and I've guesstimated. I don't know the actual figures, but they could share that with the poorest amongst their community, but they could give it to a leader, someone like Damon John, or it's really annoying, I forget his name, I think it's Eric Gardner or someone like that, or Robert Smith from Vista Capital Partners, or someone like that, to invest on their behalf, and therefore maybe he could, someone like that, or they could work together and they could look at shrewd investments which could double or even quadruple or even treble or quadruple or even 10x what they make. So if that was true, let's say 60 billion, they could turn that into not just 120 but 600 billion, which is half a trillion, and then reinvest that. And then obviously they'd have to share it between about 30 million people, or probably a bit more than that. So it'd be roughly, I think it would be about 20k each, maybe even more than that. Which could benefit, which could be a good way to empower them. That's just from saving money off their taxes and then reinvest, and that's just income tax. If they're exempt from other taxes, that'd be cool. But rather than just, that'd be even cooler. But rather than just keep it in their account, they could reinvest that money shrewdly and make it multiply, even 10x it or whatever. But anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it up there, and I am out. And peace and love.